Folks, hello and welcome to the Talking Crit live stream. I am Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. Below me is none other than my once a week work wife, spouse, Dad Mike. Mike's
Hello,
used to
everyone.
it, yeah.
I don't
And
usually say, yeah, I'm below
us,
you. I am below you.
I know. It's where you belong, Mike. I'm just saying it. I'm just, you know.
I'm very distracted tonight. I'm going to try to give Alex every bit of attention he deserves because he's kicking ass, but I am very distracted, folks.
Yeah,
I'll explain later.
All right, I won't ruin your explanation then. And with us is Alex Macris, best known across the world for Adventure Conqueror King System, Adventure Conqueror King System Imperial Imprint, which I got to say that Alex is really good at finding abbreviations that mean more than one thing.
Yes,
unlike us, yeah, that's good. That is good.
So,
you know, now this is totally unplanned, but I want to tell you what I have right by my table, Alex.
All right,
it's totally unplanned.
Oh yeah,
I was looking up some domain stuff for my campaign.
Yep.
I'm running a Dwarrow Deep campaign, and
nice.
I pulled that and a couple other books for reference, so it was just sitting right here, and I no suck up. But yeah, there's some great domain rules here. I love that book.
Bunch of folks bought Dwarrow Deep and then bought Buy This Axe and are using them together, and apparently they're having a really good time. Yeah.
So, well, I'll look into that. I think I'm pretty sure I have Buy This Axe, or I have Buy This Axe on PDF, so I need to look that up because I'm running.
It's good fun for dwarves. Yeah, it's good.
Oh yeah, okay, definitely. I probably have it. I don't know where it is, but I bet it's on my computer somewhere.
Hey, what's up, Zero Sum?
Did Mike just pull a Rob Conley? Yes, Mike just pulled a Rob. Mike just happened to have a prop to pull out.
Good, Bob. I'm not even as prepared as I was at the warehouse. I don't even have 90% of the stuff I used to have all around me at the warehouse. But I just happened to have that there.
Hello, Adam.
Got some other stuff. Do you want to see everything I have, Eric? I'll show you.
I don't know, Mike. You're scaring me already.
Take half an hour, but no.
No, it's okay. And Mike, I know you're leaving the live stream in suspense. Why are you distracted?
Because I have been a Texas Ranger fan since I saw the first game of the 1974 season when I was 11 years old. And if they win tonight, they win the World Series for the first time in their history. So 50 years of suffering. Cubs fans only think they had it bad with whatever their 100 years were, or Boston fans their 100 years. No, it's much worse than you could imagine. So
wait a minute, the World Series is going on right now?
Yeah, see, that's the reaction I get from Eric giving the same thing, like, oh, they're playing baseball still.
No, I mean, it's so wild because when I was a kid, when the World Series was happening, you knew it was everywhere, right? But now we all have these social media bubbles.
So different. Yeah, everything's so different. And normally I don't even pay attention to the World Series, but this year the Rangers somehow made it to playoffs and somehow made it in, and they're playing a game tonight. If they win, they win the title. So I'm a little distracted because I'm very nervous, very nervous because
if they lose, is it over?
No, they're up 3-1, so they have three chances to win.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. I don't care how many chances. I'm still nervous because
right. Yeah.
So I mean, and real quick, so my dad growing up, we had very little in common. My dad with myself and my three brothers, and he didn't like the things we liked. We liked different, we never really bonded. The one thing we did together was baseball games. He bought season tickets to the Rangers from 77, 78, 79, 80. And we would go almost every night during the summer. We would go, he bought 2 tickets on the first baseline. And that was the one thing I always remember about my father is that was our bonding is he would take one of the brothers, and we would go watch the Ranger game. So just kind of a really cool memory I have with him. Otherwise, Eric can tell you, I'm much more of an NFL guy, aren't I? I mean, I can talk NFL all day long forever, but yeah, that's the one thing I still have is being a Ranger fan from that. And then they just unexpectedly were good this year because they've been terrible for the last 4 or 5 years. And now I'm kind of sick to my stomach, nervous, and on pins and needles. And I'm going to start drinking heavily right here. I mean, I already started. So yeah, we're So Alex, follow that one. You can follow that. Come on, let's do it.
I mean, okay, so
Kickstarter.
My father was a huge baseball fan, and we had this policy at my middle school and high school that for every A you got free tickets, 2 free tickets for the nosebleed at the Three River Stadium to see the Pirates. So my dad was fanatical about making sure that I got nothing but A's, so that we would accumulate enough tickets. So,
that worked out great. Hey, yeah, there you go,
Alex.
That is,
you're going to really be letting me down.
No, bribery is not a terrible way to get kids to study. It really
not
isn't.
At all.
I mean, come
not
on.
At all.
They will. Look. Every kid has something they'll react to. Whether it be comic books or candy or a movie. When we were kids, we got money, and we would get I don't know, $5 for an A, $2 for a B, nothing for any. And so yes, that motivated me with the kid because I liked money. And so, yes, money was a huge motivator for grades, when I was a kid. Should I study a little more? Oh, man, I really want that $5. Yeah, I'm going to study a little more.
Yeah.
I need to get that rolling. But so anyways, so I just showed a book there. So obviously this game has come out before. What are we looking at here? What's the new Kickstarter?
All right. So it's Adventure Conqueror King System Imperial Imprint, or ACKS II. ACKS came out in 2012, so it's now 11 years old. And in that time, we've moved from, 4th edition effectively to 6th edition of D&D without a new edition of the game. So the time felt right, for a revised rule book. My initial plan had been just, kind of a consolidation of what I had published to date. But, in January, we had the perfidious treachery of Wizards of the Coast deauthorizing the open game license. So I decided it made sense to do a truly new edition that removed my game from the open game license. So it's still, 98% backwards compatible. It was going to be 99% backwards compatible. But I used it as an opportunity to make a bigger product that has a lot more stuff. So it's not just a reconsolidation. Now it's a 3-volume series. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, you're not screwing around. Wow, that looks beautiful. I just saw it. Oh my God. Yeah.
So we partnered with this company called Scorchmarked Engraving, which is they have a full service print on demand business. And so, and they can do, not just like the cheap plastic stuff, but they can take and assemble wood and then do laser etching on the wood and just all kind of cool stuff. So they are doing those poplar wood slipcases for us.
Those look really, really
So
good.
what do you get? So the regular, just if you got the vanilla, it's just the rule book, right? What's the extra if you get the special?
The slipcase is $50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's really beautiful, really nice.
Yeah, it's right now. It's the $200 gets you the 3 hardcovers, each of which is about 500 pages, and it gets you the judge's screen, and then if you can buy the slipcase for an extra $50. So. Yeah. And then there's of course, higher tiers from there and lower tiers, but that's like the main tier that most people are buying.
That's I'm in for the books and the screen, and then I was like, I don't know about do I need the slipcase? And then I might need the slipcase in the end. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see how many people want the slipcase. One thing I've heard from some foreign backers is they're concerned that if they add the slipcase, it changes the tariff situation because there's no longer books. And so we might have a lot of people skipping on the slipcase that otherwise wanted it just to make sure the books stay tariff free. So.
Interesting. I being in the States and not being on the receiving end of stuff, like that, you're like, that's an issue if you're outside, especially in Europe. Yeah. Holy crap.
It really is.
So I had a question for you.
Hit me.
When this launched, how surprised were you at the response out of the gate?
Very surprised. So the night before, I literally sat on my bed and I prayed to God, and I said, please let us fund to 50,000 on day one, and please let us hit 100,000. And the reason for that 100,000 number was that 100,000 was more or less the number I needed to keep Autark's doors open full time. And that was my prayer. So 50K first day, 100K, and we broke 190,000 on the first day. We broke 50K in the first 30 minutes. So I was absolutely astounded, flabbergasted. Like I kind of walked around in a daze all day, and so yeah. So I'm just so grateful.
Yeah, that's. I mean, well, Eric and I have talked about. I mean, I know you probably don't watch the show very much, if at all, but we've had a, this year has been a crazy year with all the OGL crap start out, but it's been a great year for independents because you had Kelsey and Shadow Dark made 1.3 million, Dolmenwood made 1.3 million, Tales of the Valiant made 1.1 million. Even some of the smaller, books did really well. I know Matt Finch's Swords of Wizardry did really well. I mean, and so people are out there and they're hungry to give their money to anybody but WotC.
Yeah,
it seems like, and so that's good. That and every time I see something like that, I'm like, well, anybody saying the OSR is dead is ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. People are out there looking for alternatives.
Yes.
Yeah. No, the OSR is very much alive, and it's great to see. Like when I came back to gaming, I had a very fairly large interlude between when I played 2E and then I skipped all the 3E and 4E, and I came back initially playing VTTs, like a little Warhammer 40K Dark Heresy, and then I was playing VTTs with like voice and video with Google Hangouts and Fantasy Grounds 2, and we were doing the 5E D&D Next beta test, and Greg Christopher was running it, and we burned out. And we burned out on the beta test because they kept on changing the rules every 2 to 3 weeks, and it was
right.
You couldn't get a group that really wanted to stick with the rules. Once you found something that was fun, they changed it again. So Greg's like, I'm burned out. Somebody needs to DM, and I hadn't DM'd in well over a decade. And initially, I was like, oh, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna use Osric because it's like AD&D, and this was fun for a couple of sessions. But then I was like, oh, I got ACKS. I go, let me really read it, and I went, holy shit, this is like Labyrinth Lord meets AD&D meets the way I've always wanted to see my demi-human. I always wanted to see demi-humans not as a class, but as class specific.
Yeah.
Where they have their own type of fighter. They have their own type of caster. And I was like, yeah, no, this is it. This is what I'm running. This is it. And it was really, really a great fit for me. And I've really enjoyed it ever since. And I actually I think it was when Domains of War was being playtested. It was a playtest session in Manhattan I actually came into to play that one out. And
awesome!
It was I think it was working off of Glimmermount, and it was a blast. So I have a lot of very fond memories of running ACKS and playing with ACKS. So long story short, Greg Christopher, same Greg Christopher. Me, Joe the lawyer, who's here in the chat, and a few others. We game every other week, and now Greg wants to pick up that every other week and start running ACKS.
Oh, that's awesome!
And Greg's like, he wrote Ambition and Avarice, and he's like, the only system that I really want to run that I haven't written, he goes, is Alex's ACKS. He goes, that's the one that is. If I was going to build a game of this size and this detail, he goes, this is what I would want. So that is, to me, when another game designer is like, I could run my own, but I'd rather run ACKS because that's what I want to play. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's about the highest praise you can give a designer, is to say, your game is so good, I'll run it rather than design my own. There's a few games in some other genres where I feel that way for sure. Like Mike Pondsmith's Mechton, for instance, is just, an amazing game that I've run, etc. Yeah. All
right. So Joe has a question for you, Alex. I know you're invested in Foundry, but what are the chances you can put something out for Roll20?
So, it's like I said, I didn't actually expect we'd get past 100K. So I was just trying to think of nice to haves above that for stretch goals, and everybody on my Discord really liked Foundry, and I was like, oh well, I guess if I do that well, we'll do like a Foundry thing. So now, we did that well, so we have to do a Foundry thing. From what I understand from like the people that are technically savvy, there's a lot of overlap because they use similar data formats. So if we implement a bunch of character sheets and data entry in the one, then it should be fairly easy to port to the other. So if I can, I'll support both. I picked Foundry just because that's what my community had primarily picked. It was from a strictly business point of view, there's probably more money in Roll20 because of their tie-in with Drive-Thru RPG. But I was just trying to give back to the community with a cool stretch goal.
Well,
I have a question. If I can ask that, Eric. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, because this I can't even remember last time I talked to Alex about stuff, and I don't remember what his answers were. But one of the things that's really cool about ACKS is the fact that you focus a lot of attention on something that most gamers don't, which is Endgame. Endgame, your armies are going to be battle, kind of like Conan, towards the end of the stuff when he was, he wasn't just a dude running around in tombs anymore. He was a king and controlled armies. You've got rules for epic battles, for what you do after you become, and the thing about most fantasy type games is usually you play until that point and then it breaks down and you go, hey, let's start first level characters again because that's what was really fun, and you just kind of do that. Right. So what made you sit there and say no, this can be fun, you just got to do this and this?
Well, I guess a host of things. The first game I ever designed was a war game, and I my initial career goal as a young man was I wanted to be a professor at the U.S. Army War College, and I went to West Point and studied military history. So I've always loved military history and wargaming, and I've also always loved role-playing games. And so the hybrid of the two had been something that had appealed to me for years. Like BattleTech and Mechton had that, Car Wars had that a bit, or like the similar sort of dual-level gameplay you see in XCOM or Medieval Total War. So I had always enjoyed that. When I started running my Arn Empire campaign, I thought to myself, let me set up something where, if the folks are into it, we can actually get to the point where they're taking over the empire and there's great battles. Let me see if I can make this work. And it turned out I was able to make it work. It took a lot of effort, and I had to design a lot of rules, and I wrote domains at war, et cetera, et cetera. And but people really dug it. So then I said, okay, this is there's other people that enjoy this too. This is commercially viable. And so then I turned it into a Kickstarter, teamed up with some good dudes, and we got it out to market. Interestingly enough, when the game first launched, most people didn't use the mass combat because they were used to just playing low-level campaigns, and there's like this sort of like people play first to third level or whatever. And so the game got a lot of attention for its economic engine, but the economic engine was actually just there to be the logistics for the grand sweeping military campaigns. It's just like, it's not that I actually care how much a fantasy farmer eats and has surplus grain, but like if you're going to field an army, you need to know that because you need to know how much you can plunder from the peasants. So
before they start dropping like flies.
Yeah, just like Eric and I always talk about this, most dungeons don't have bathrooms. Well, there's no mechanics for, hey, there's a group of 87 orcs coming through. What are they eating? I mean they've got to be eating something, or an army. I mean, our armies, I'm a fan of the Napoleonic stuff and Napoleonic wars, and you look at how they had to run. I mean, one of the biggest things they had to figure out was where we're going to feed these guys and where we're going to get the food from. And so I like that that focus on that too. Is like, look, you have to figure this stuff out. It's just like D&D. You can't have a dungeon with dragon in one room, the next room has 6 trolls, the next room has 47 goblins. Go ahead and make it a little bit realistic at least. Give me something. So that's very, very useful rules.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, they don't model the logistics, the supply or anything, and then they don't really understand why then the military side of the world doesn't play like they expect it to. it's because those are so central to military operations. Like, why are you besieging a castle? Well, you need to besiege it. You can't bypass it because it sits on your supply line. You know, why? You know, why are you following this route of advance rather than others? Well, this route has a navigable river that can bring food to my troops. So therefore, the enemy knows I'm going to be by this navigable river, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think you can't really model. You can't model military fantasy without modeling logistics. Just like you can't model dungeon delving if you don't actually model encumbrance and torches and things like that.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there's a whole genre set up for what they call funhouse dungeons, which means it doesn't make any sense. That you could have the crazy stuff in there, but so few do we hear like, hey, I want my dungeon to actually make sense. I would
Yeah.
I'd like to do it, and we don't have a name for that. We just call that, just play a D&D. But yeah, so few of the time do they actually make sense that we learn just to skip over that part in our head. Just say, just whatever, it's just D&D. But it's kind of fun when it makes sense, isn't it? Like, when you have encumbrance and that you don't want to have a massive, stop down rules for it, but you want to have something that makes it
Something simple. Yeah.
Yeah, your horse can't carry, 50,000 gold pieces. You have to figure out how you're going to get those gold pieces back to camp, or, and the same thing with food. What are you guys going to eat? You have an army of 200 people. You got to eat something.
Yeah, I call that the noetic appreciation of verisimilitude, right? It's like the reverse of suspension of disbelief, where like suspension of disbelief, you have to struggle to enjoy it by pretending by sort of ignoring what is obviously makes no sense.
Right.
Noetic appreciation of verisimilitude means you enjoy it more because you're able to appreciate how realistic it is. And that's something I really try to put into all of my games and adventures and scenarios. Hey, Willie, what's up? That's my brother.
Oh, cool.
Got everybody out today. All right.
Got a full house.
Yeah, it's my older brother who taught me to play Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, he's like,
really,
yeah.
Well, that's very cool. I still play the group I play with now. I play with my middle brother. My youngest brother went corporate many years ago. He's an insurance agent. He does not play D&D anymore. But my youngest brother, we've been playing together since 1978. So he's,
that's awesome.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things where we can finish each other's thoughts when it comes to stuff. He understands. He can pick out what I'm going to do. I have to be really cagey, not for him.
Right. Yeah.
Cagey.
So my brother, he's about 9 years older than me. We lived overseas when I was very young, and then we came back to the U.S. in 1979. In like 1980, I guess I was about 5. He was about 13 or 14, and he joined the D&D club at school. And so he came home with the boxes and the books and all the miniatures. And of course, here's 6-year-old me going, "Oh my goodness, I need to play with you." And, and he was so sweet to like play with his little 6-year-old kid brother. But, little did he know the monster he would be unleashing on the world.
Oh boy.
Oh.
Well, the same thing. My brother, my youngest brother was, I want to say 7 or 8. And, he wanted to play with us so bad. We were like, no, we didn't want to play with our little brother, And so he would sit there with this character sheet. We're like, okay, you can sit there, and when we call on you, you can jump in. Poor little guy, he's just sitting there with this character sheet. And so I think we had pity on him a few times, like, okay, yeah, we'll hire your guy, come along. He would just get so excited. If I had to live that over again, I would have brought him in and let him play, because we were just being like, oh, the little brother. We don't want the little brother to play, but he would just watch us with his character sheet and his grubby little hand, hoping he could play. But it's really cool, because I taught all my grandkids have all played, and it's so cool seeing the game through non-jaded eyes like that. Because it's so pure. It's so pure because they just want to. There's nothing involved. So I want to be this guy with a big sword or that can cast a spell, and I want to do some really cool stuff. You don't have to delve into all the intricate politics of the thing. Just play a game. So I love playing with kids. It's cool.
I was running games by age 7 or 8, and I made all my friends play with me. What was very funny was when I got into high school, my brother was at that point, I think he was a year out of college, and he had some friends that were a couple years younger than him that were still in college, and they were looking for a dungeon master. And so he was like, oh, you should ask my brother to do it. And they're like, your 14-year-old brother? And he's like, yeah, he's really good. So I ended up becoming I became like the dungeon master for the Allegheny Community College Gaming Club. And they used to like pick me up on Friday nights and take me over to the college campus, and I would run games, and then they'd like race back to try and get me home by curfew. And me in high school, like getting bullied. I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? I hang out with college kids on the weekend, so fuck you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very Rob Coots. I don't know if you know the history of Rob Coots, but people don't realize how young he was when he became co-DM of Gary Gygax's Greyhawk. And Rob had a touch of genius in him. So he was like a teenager, and he and Gary would hand off Dungeon
Really?
Greyhawk.
That's awesome.
Guess who Gary? Yeah, that's who Gary's DM was. Gary's DM was Rob. When Gary wanted to go in the dungeon, he would be Rob, and when Rob, but he was very young. He was Ernie's friend, so he was the same age as Ernie during that time.
Right.
Gygax family just kind of adopted, but yeah, there's such precedent for being a little being young, but yet having your S together enough to be able to to do that kind of thing. That's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like child prodigy skills, it's not a very lucrative one. Like my parents were like, you couldn't have been like the world's youngest chess master or some shit. But, we don't control the gifts that we're given, only what we do with them.
So what's going to be new? What's new in this? Because I have ACKS. So I don't need all this extra new stuff.
You need it. Okay, so
do I?
Revised
new in there that I'm going to want to look at if I.
So the revised rulebook. First off, we've got improved systems for strongholds, mercantile ventures, magic research, and I should add, when I say improved, I mean not more complex, but streamlined and easier to run.
Ooh.
So without loss of detail, I'm just a better designer than I was then, and so the systems are simply better. I've had 10 years of experience, so the entire Endgame is just better than it was. We've also now added naval rules, which is a big first for ACKS. We've added weather rules for wilderness expeditions. We've added spelunking rules, so if you want to do rappelling or squeeze through choke points or things like that, we've all got the mechanics for that. The combat system has been improved a little bit. It's mostly the same, but there's been some improvements. Thieves have been dramatically improved with some new mechanics that make them a real delight to play. And then over in the Judges Journal, I mean, we've got a huge amount of new information to help GMs, build out their campaign world. Tons of rules to customize the setting, custom races, custom magic types, custom spells, custom classes. And then the monstrous manual is greatly expanded. Every creature gets its own page. And a lot of people have asked me for years for rules on monster breeding. So it's like, if I capture Pegasi, how many eggs can I get per year? And how long does it take them to grow up and stuff? So they now cover, the monstrous manual now covers all of that. So, if you get a baby gelatinous slime and a gelatinous cube, and you need to know how many pounds of matter it needs to consume, like it's all in there.
And actually, these are questions that my teenage groups would ask me as a GM. It's like,
oh yeah,
yeah. Hey, we got that hippogriff. Yeah, can we breed it? I go, how the hell should I know? Yeah, well, we could all have a hippogriff in a couple of years, right? I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
So we'll breed it. I'm like, oh Jesus! And you're making up shit on the fly.
Yep. So, exactly. Yeah. So. I think that a lot of those questions are really natural questions that should emerge. Like, I mean, what did humans do when they encountered horses? They domesticated and bred them. So, like, why would you not want to try and do that with this cool monster that can fly or whatever? Mm-hmm. But we're so used to games not covering and supporting that. And we all take for granted that the fantasy economy can't make sense. And it's all just kind of ridiculous that everyone is on these blinders where they don't even want to look at that. They don't want to write rules for it. And so, that's been, I think, one of ACKS's big strengths has been, offering rules for all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Rob Conley has a question, and it's a rules question. Did you ever do any work on fishing and fishing yield like you did with peasants, herding, and mining?
No, I didn't. It's always been on my list of things to do, but I haven't gotten to it. So agroforestry, lumberjacking, fishing would all be interesting places to expand further.
Okay. I think Joe is hinting that he wants to come into the chat into the live and ask.
I'm joking. Coming. I mean,
yeah, no, I know.
What is? Can you put the link in Discord? Oh no, he just said you put the link.
No, I know.
You said okay.
Joe's Discord is
he was speaking.
When we do the Iron, when we do the Dungeons and Dragons. No, that's.
I got you.
Random party generator on every other Friday. I know.
Well,
I know.
I invade the random party generator enough. I'm always invading that. If he wants to invade this, he's welcome. He probably has some really good questions. So yes, if he wants to come in and ask questions, Rob can't come in though. No, Rob Conley can't come in though. But Joe can.
I love that idea. Right? I love that.
Actually, Rob's great. It's just that Rob will beat you down, Alex, and we were trying to save you from that. He will absolutely beat you down because he will ask you so many questions that will just grind to a halt, and Eric and I will fall asleep.
I think Alex is referring to the comment on the screen. The assassin's operandi is to put frozen baby gelatinous cubes in their marked drinks. Ouch.
Oh, dude.
I love that. Thank you very much.
That's ugly.
Damn it, that's Rob. Yeah.
So, Joe, the link is there. If you're going to invade, we'll be prepared for you.
So if you're looking at most old school games, I notice that you're really big about balancing the classes in a big way, and because everybody kind of has their thing they do well, but the way your average D&D game goes is it starts out the fighters are very powerful. As time builds on, the mages become uber powerful, and they basically end up controlling everything. How did you manage to balance that out? We're going to have, fighters are going to be, and mages and thieves are going to all kind of be on the same level till they get high level.
Yeah. So, so the first edition, I didn't solve it with thieves. I think I've solved it in ACKS II. So for fighters, what I did is I went back to the various early iterations of the game, and I saw that early on, that fighters had gotten 1 attack per hit die, and that this actually kind of scaled approximately with how much unit casualties a wizard could do in chainmail. But then that rule, when it went into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, became 1 attack per level against creatures of less than 1 hit die, which of course meant virtually nothing. And then when it went into BX, it was just 1 attack. And so essentially, a 14th level fighter in chainmail was attacking 14 times per round, but a 14th level fighter in BX was attacking once per round. And I identified that as the core of where the quadratic wizard linear fighter problem had come from. And I experimented with a bunch of different methods of resolving that. And the one I settled on was actually one that Dave Arneson suggested on Dragon's Foot, and he called it chop till you drop. And the idea was if the fighter kills somebody, he gets to attack again. And so I said, okay, if the fighter kills somebody, he gets to attack again up to his number of hit dice. And then in conjunction with that, I added a damage bonus based on the fighter level. So as the fighter is higher level, he's more likely to get a kill. And each time he gets a kill, he gets to attack again. And so that lets you actually have on the battlefield, a 10th level fighter can take out an entire platoon of enemy troops in 3 rounds. You can do scenes like your kind of your samurai movies where the Kensai sword master kills 8 men in 1 round, like no problem. So for thieves, it was a lot trickier because it was weird in that everybody either thought thieves were fine and you were a monster for suggesting they could be improved, or they thought that they were so terrible that they shouldn't have even been added to the game, and there wasn't like a lot of middle ground. So I kind of just decided, well, I just have to kind of chart my own path there. And so with thieves, I identified as one of the major flaws of the way they played was that elves and dwarves and most of the monsters got to see in the dark, and thieves didn't, but thieves were supposed to be able to hide in shadows and be sneaky. And I felt that was really weird. It was like, imagine being a ninja in 15th century Japan, but everybody has modern thermal vision goggles. Like, well, that would really suck. So I got rid of infravision for the demi-human races. I've reduced the range of infravision for some of the monsters, and I gave the thieves this shadowy senses ability. I also let them do hasty and methodical searches for traps, hasty and methodical lockpicking, things like that, so that they have some control of time spent versus chance of success.
All right. We open up the back door. We'll let Joe in.
I see Asmodeus has joined the chat.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't communicated with you since when Dwemer Round actually came out, the real version, our RPG site, I think. Not the false fake version, whatever the hell that was. Yeah, man, what's going on? Thanks for having me here, man.
Oh, good to see you.
Dude,
all right, you begged to come on. Give us some content, brother.
Give
us some content.
First of all, I like Verisimilitude.
Hey guys.
Oh, here we fuck.
Oh no, Rob too.
All right, now we're done now. But let me get a word in before Rob starts talking. After that, it's gonna be all over. Yeah. So I like where orcs take a crap in the dungeons. It has to make sense to me. So that's my jam. You know what I mean? Not orc crap, but that's what I'm kind of into. It all has to make sense. And I was telling these guys the other day, a couple of times, there's only a few books that I've ever bought for D&D that have wow, this made me a better player and DM. Well, the first, foundationally speaking, was Gygax's, first edition DMG, because that was the foundation of everything.
Absolutely.
Another one is Sly Flourish's Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master. Rob's book that I edited recently on how to run the hex crawl, basically, and your Arbiter of Worlds, which I have in front of me right now. It's the third.
Oh, nice.
So it's I love your approach. It's really, really good. I love how it all makes sense. I'm curious because I think what Bad Mike was just talking about in terms of keeping things in a sort of a balance, especially when it comes to shifting from a one-on-one kind of a combat into a battle, like a mass battle or a small skirmish of several hundred people. When you bring the mage in, you're dropping fireballs. How does it not make sense that the 8d6 or 10d6 fireball isn't wiping out massive amounts of troops? Remember the battle system days, they nerfed wizards, right? They had to scale back everything to make it sort of not overpower the fighters and everybody else, but it never made any sense. And I heard your interview on Unscripted and Unchained. He's been on our show a couple of weeks ago, where you talked about how you made it completely scalable without having to change. How did you manage that with things like Fireball for mass combat? What did you do?
That's a great question. So the first thing I did was I figured out what did I want the battles to look like. And I wanted the mass combat to still have massed formations of troops, right? So blocks of troops moving around the battlefield, as compared to like your World War II style small units scattered across a wide area kind of thing. So I wanted pitched battle with mass blocks of troops. But I also wanted to have, wizards able to do their wizard thing and fling fireballs around.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, and I did some research, what was the last time period when you actually had mass blocks of troops, but you also had cannons? And it was the Napoleonic era. And so the Napoleonic era served as my inspiration for how to make mass combat work. And so what I did is I went through all of the spells and I went through the demographics of mages and I tuned everything so that given the number of mages you'd have versus the amount of spells they'd have and the area of effect and damage their spells would do, that it would approximate the impact of cannon on a Napoleonic battlefield.
Okay.
And so, yes, they make a huge difference. You can have your grand battery at Borodino, which is devastating, but they don't necessarily win the battle. You win the battle by having the mass troops that get to where they need to be and seize the territory.
So,
as an example,
that would make wizards a little bit more frequent than actually even I would have in my campaign.
Yeah, they're not like ultra rare, but they're there's a few hundred of them with an army.
So what's the average level of a wizard that hangs out that's serving the army? What's your?
Well, I mean, the average level is going to be very low just because the population shrinks as they go up. But essentially, it works out if you follow my demographic advice that for every 600 troops, you get about 1 5th level mage that can cast a fireball, and that fireball has a 10-foot has a 10-foot radius rather than a 20-foot radius,
Okay.
which makes the difference between being able to wipe out a company and being able to wipe out a platoon. So that mage can kill about 30 men with this fireball, which is great, right?
What about
That's
spells like Firestorm, though, man? What about something like that? Do you just eliminate those that are like mass? No, you keep them in.
Yeah, no, we've got. Well, I mean, I had to eliminate some just because of the open game license, but there's spells like Conflagration, which is like a 6-level spell, and it'll wipe out an entire company of troops, and that's fantastic. But you need to be 11th level, and there's going to be like one 11th level mage in an army of 20,000. So yeah, he can do that, and it can be decisive, but you still need the troops. So that was the hardest design challenge of the whole mass combat.
I could imagine. I've been struggling with that forever. I mean, and I haven't found a way to do it, because if your PC, if I'm DMing a game and there's a 15 level PC wizard, if it's a couple thousand troops versus a couple thousand troops, his team may as well not show up. He's flying invisibility, improve the visibility and just dropping like a B-52 all over the damn place, right? And one dragon has the same effect as well.
Well, so ACKS's answer to that is twofold. Is one, unlike Battle System and Chainmail, we're not scaled at 1 to 10. There's actually 4 scales of mass combat: platoon, company, brigade, and battalion. So at platoon scale, 1 stand of figures, or one unit counter represents 30 men. By the time you get up to brigade scale, 1 stand or unit represents 1,920 men. And so if you're a 14th level mage, you're fighting brigade scale battles. And so there's 12 or 13 brigades of 2,000 men each moving on your side. And if there's that many troops on your side and that many troops on the other guy's side, then the demographics will simply yield that the other side is also going to have its casters and its monstrous allies and things like that in about the right proportion. Now, it is true, if you take a 14th level mage and you go fight a platoon scale battle, he will wipe the floor with 1st level and 0th level mercenaries and kill 120 of them. He absolutely will. The question is, why is he doing that? He's a 14th level mage. He's the most powerful mage on the continent. Is he just like taking a vacation and like killing some people? Right? And ACKS has answers for that, because we have that whole support for the endgame of magic research and domain rulership. So, you're much less likely to run into those weird situations.
Well, circumstances matter too. That's what I experienced a couple years back when I ran using Battle System 1st edition. The party was around 8th level, and they were going through an orc-infested forest, with bad guys that were adventuring there. And they ran afoul of an orc tribe, and they realized they were over their heads. But the first orc tribe came at them, and they pretty much wiped out the orc tribe. But they blew everything they had. But the thing is, they were far enough into the forest, and I take a lot of I put a lot of stock in the fact that communication doesn't happen right away. So absolutely. I know how long word would take to the other orc tribe, more or less. So what happened until they got back to the city-state invincible overlord is all these orc tribe did eventually hear about the party and did try to come at them piecemeal, but they were all wanted at a time. They never really got their stuff together to go after them in mass. So the party was able to rest in between. They would travel for a day, rest, re-up their spells, and take on the next one. But the fights kept getting harder and harder as the orcs and their leaders, more importantly, their leader, realized what they were facing. And the last fight, the only reason they got out of the last fight is one of the party members was a knight, and he rode in horseback, and he was an 8th level fighter, so he got 8 attacks per round, which translates even in battle system to pretty nice. But what he ignored trying to turn the battle, he went right for the orc spellcaster, took out the spellcaster, and bought the party time to escape the orcs after they killed like a quarter of the number and forced a morale check. And the party then realized, at first they were getting cocky, but then they realized that we're out of here. And they spent that last remaining day getting back to city-state.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. These things can be a lot of fun. And
I agree. I like this the smaller scale skirmish, a few hundred. That's my sweet spot for battles. I've never been to the big battle system sort of things. You know, I've never been a war gamer, but I do like on the smaller scale. You got 6-level guys, 8-level guys, and they have a few hundred on their side or whatever. That's the fun thing for me. I think it's just if I could find a way to do that, that makes sense. That doesn't bog you down forever. Like Delta's Book of War. Remember that, guys, that came out in the old early OSR days? That was fantastic. You play tested the crap out of that with computer simulations. He sort of balanced everything out. But it had the same problem. You can't dump a magic user in there because it would break the system, right? So he kind of scaled it a little bit differently, but it was still a good resource.
Yeah, you have to rescale the mages to make sense.
That's it.
So
but you know, a 10-foot radius fireball versus a 20-foot radius fireball, it seems like a trivial change, but it's actually a really big change, right?
I can imagine.
It's the difference between 300 square feet and 1,200 square feet of casualties. It's like a 4x difference. But it doesn't really nerf the mage in adventuring, because how often is he really hitting a room that's larger than 20-foot diameter with a fireball?
Yeah.
And so that was like a lot of the focus was figuring out, how do I make these spells that they're, you know, useful and fun at the high end, but also still useful and fun in the adventures.
So this, 600, 1/5 level mage to 600 troop ratio that you came up with your demographic. How do you account that for outside of combat? Like in GURPS, one perennial, if you go into GURPS forum and debate GURPS magic, one of the things that will generally come up is the earth to stone spell. And the fact that you can take the way the spell reads, you can take a arbitrary pile of dirt and turn it into iron, or you can't turn it into gold, but you can turn it into a variety of useful material. And people debate its impact on what would be, how could you have a medieval setting with mages being able to do that? So that would be my question. How do you account for the fact that mages are not exactly common, but they're not uncommon either?
How much detail do you want me to go into? Because
I'm game for anything, but it's your Kickstarter.
Whatever you're comfortable with, Alex.
Okay, sure. All right, so it's a great question. In order to solve it, I essentially had to build an entire metaphysics system for the world, and I had to go through all of the spells with a fine-tooth comb. So there's a couple different mechanics that interact to make it work. So one is the GP threshold mechanic, which says if you go adventuring, whatever treasure you get XP for. But if you do downtime activities like magic research or domain rulership, you get XP from the wealth or value of those activities, but there's a threshold you have to meet first before you get them. So if you're first level, the first 25 gold pieces that you net from your downtime activities gets you no XP, and then above that. And then that doubles, so that at any given level, the activities you have to be doing to get XP become more and more and more difficult. And if you don't have access to the resources to make that happen, then you kind of stall out. So if I'm an 8th level, the easiest one to understand is the fighter, right? If I'm an 8th level fighter with a legature, an 8th level domain, I'm not going to advance to 9th level from downtime activity. I would need to conquer a bigger domain, or I'd need to go adventuring. Okay. So then the second question is, okay, well, what is it that the mages are doing with their downtime? And the economic assumption is that the mages spend most of their time doing magic research. And so to do magic research, you need to spend time, you need to spend money, and you need to spend magical components. So where do they get the time? Well, that's their downtime. They get the money from selling magic items or doing commissioned spells. And then where do they get the magic components? Well, they can buy them from adventurers. They can farm them from monsters and dungeons, but they can also scavenge existing magic items and use them as the basis for more magic items, which gives us a nice circular flow of magic items in the economy. And I was inspired by that, by the real world behavior of people in massively multiplayer games, where it's very, very common in massively multiplayer games that you get experience points from crafting, and you have to increasingly craft more complex things to level up. And so you create tons of items, and then you break them down and use them as components to make tons more items, and you break them down and use them as components and break more items. And so I have a whole circular flow worked out of exactly how many magic items that yields in the world, and then based on the demographics of the world, I'm able to distribute those out.
So it sounds like you incorporate within your game system, the world, has to be there as well. You have a metaphysical system, you have a base standard world, and it assumes at least a mid-level magic, if not a high magic world. How would it work with a low magic world?
I published a separate supplement called Heroic Fantasy Handbook for a low magic world with a different magic system and ceremonial spells. It works fine. Okay. I should add there's another thing is that in ACKS, a wizard can't do permanent effects with magic. He can do instantaneous effects like a fireball, right? But he can't do truly permanent magic. He can only do perpetual magic, which lasts while he sustains it during his lifetime. And there's a limit to the number of spells you can perpetually sustain.
And
so let's take
avoid the earth to stone problem.
Let's take continual illumination, right? Like if continual illumination is a second level spell, why isn't there, an ever glowing light bulb everywhere? Well, it's a perpetual spell, and you can only sustain a certain number of them. So it's true. It's probably the Emperor does have a dude whose full-time job is just to sustain the continual illumination spell so that he can bathe in bright light in the evening. But, it's not at such a scale that
funny thing is like the electric power plant. You take that guy out, the entire city goes down.
Exactly, exactly,
blackness,
right? You've got like that, the 12th level guy who's responsible for maintaining the lighting in the palace, and he gets killed, and you're like, shit. Exactly.
Blackout.
So what will break a perpetual spell? Just the mage's death, or
to spell magic?
Okay.
Yeah, so like for instance, in ACKS, you'd be a fool to build your fortress using wall of stone because the walls of stone can all be dispelled. So instead, what people do is you use wall of stone to create a mold, and then you pour Roman concrete in the mold, and that's how you build your super cool castle.
I hope you don't mind, Alex, but I'm going to steal that idea of perpetual. I think that solves a lot lot of problems.
Steal away. I mean, the game is going to be open license. So
what about magic items, Alex? Same thing. I mean, like a wand or a +1 sword. Does it die when the mage dies, or is that a permanent?
No. So you can make permanent magic items, but to do so, you have to allocate. You have to basically get, we call it arcane power from some source and plug it into the weapon.
Yeah.
And one of the best sources of arcane power is existing magic items. So, for instance, if let's say you take the +1 sword, you don't need it. Everybody in the party has a +2 sword. So you take it to the Wizards Guild. They pay you some money for it. And they're not like, oh, hey, now we have a +1 sword. They just break it down for its components, and then they use it for their spell.
Pretty cool. I like that too. I really like that.
Do you have permanency as a high level spell?
So we don't. So because ACKS caps at 14th level, the spells cap at 6th level. 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells are called rituals, and they take a really long time to do, and they take a lot of money, and you need to have a source of arcane power for them. So we do have it. Like the Emperor, for instance, probably could get a permanent, invulnerability to evil cast on him, so he can't be easily assassinated by someone, or so it does exist, but it exists at a very high strata. So it's like it is a medium to high magic world, but I guess the way to think about it, like we've all seen these videos of in Japan where they have this amazing automation, and you go into the convenience store and there's like a robot that basically is serving you, and their trains look like spaceships. You're like, that's amazing, right? But that exists in one city on the world where 10 million people live, and that's a planet of 8 billion, and the vast majority of them are still living at the subsistence level. Same kind of thing with magic.
I wrote about this. My incidence of mages is slightly lower than yours, but a friend of mine, a good friend, one of my best friends, who's gaming with for years, really hates. Doesn't like mages. Just don't control everything in my majestic Wonderland setting, and I explained to him, well, and I had trouble explaining to him what exactly happened, but then I came up with this idea. It's like it's a medieval world that I considered as 20% better, more health, more productivity. But within this world, there are islands of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
where you have the lights on all the time, where they don't need cropland to grow food because they just go and create the food every day and stock the larder.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and I call these islands of wonder, and they are around. But unfortunately, like you mentioned, the majors are driven to do their research to advance themselves, and if they don't, they don't have the idea of industrialization as a philosophy, because
Right.
most people don't realize it's not just about the technology; it's about the philosophy
Right.
of putting the people in the factory, and you know they got their own concerns to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually take a similar attitude. Uh, I modeled so ACKS is actually modeled after late antiquity rather than the Middle Ages, um, for a variety of reasons, but primarily just personal interest. But anyway, so I modeled it after late antiquity, and it was very interesting because people had worked out what was the GDP of the Roman Empire. There's a range of estimates by the experts, but I used that as my basis, and I came into where the GDP of the Aran Empire is somewhat higher than that of the Roman Empire, and the quality of life is a little bit better, but it's still within a realistic range. And so it's kind of like the ancient world as we wish it would have been. With like the shittiness dialed down a little bit, so your teeth don't fall out from a childhood disease or whatever. But it's still, you still got peasants working the fields, and you still got troops in mass fighting wars and all the things that you need.
That leads to one other thing too. We're talking about wars and development in history. I've been asking this question for 15 years, and I still haven't found anybody who had a decent response that made sense to me. In the evolution, whether you're doing late antiquity, dark ages, early Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, whatever you want to, whatever you're at, you have these large forts or fortresses, right? And they evolved and they developed from huts to hill forts to great medieval castles to Castle Croc, right out there in wherever the Middle East, and these massive fortresses, um, ignoring rock to mud spells and things like that. I've been sort of arguing that basically in a world where magic exists and mages exist, and you could act like the B-52 bomber flying overhead and invisible. I don't think castles would have ever developed the same way they did. In other words, you can't just say I'm going to be a Middle Ages game here, or a late antiquity game, or a Dark Ages game with all the large defendable positions that you had in that era, and then lay over on top of that a layer of magic users and clerics and every other darn thing, because it would have affected the evolution of those structures. They would not have evolved the same way. You see what I'm trying to say? Does that make any sense, Alex? Is that a
No, I mean it makes good sense. The way I have thought about it, because I've thought about the same issue, is although Rob thinks the number of mages is very high, it's not actually that high. If you look at the number of castles that exist in the world, right? Like there are parts of Europe where there is a castle every 6 miles. And or in the Roman Empire, right? You had like a line of border forts that stretched along the entire frontier. When you think about these, we tend to think about fantasy worlds like Game of Thrones, when each castle has like a cool name, Winterfell, and it's 2,000 years old, right? And like, no, actually, there's like a castle every 6 mile hex, and maybe it might be a small manor home, it might be a tower, and within that space, that fortress does exactly what it needs to do for the opposition it's likely to face. So yes, it is true that a high-level mage could show up with the B-52 bomber and destroy the Baron's local tower. But
or even dragons? I mean, big ass red dragon, boom, 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 hex to hex to hex, right? Wiping it out.
I mean, well, yes and no. They can't hurt. They can't hurt stone that much with fire. But yeah, I mean, that absolutely could happen. But if you run the demographics as written, it doesn't happen. I mean, I've played campaigns going into hundreds of sessions where the players have tons of gold to decide what to do with, and none of them has ever said, you know what, I don't think castles are worthwhile. In fact, many of our biggest battles have been, we did at the end of the Aran Empire, It was a walled citadel being assailed by the 14th level sorcerer king with his undead and dire beastmen minions, and he had dragons and he had call lightning spells and just all sorts of crazy shit happening. And they had the same, but like they would have been wiped out if they hadn't had the fortress. They would have been defeated if it was an open field battle.
So Joe, one thing you need to consider is that in the real world, in real history, there was magic, not D&D magic, but it was not developed with the scientific method. It was developed by centuries of trial and error and overlaid with whatever cultural mythology and folklore on top of it. But to the average person living their life, it was essentially magic. So it's not a fireball erupting out of their hand, but when you're the Byzantine Empire and you develop Greek fire, then you're the only one who can make it. The imperial house, the imperial bureaucracy is the only one that can make it. Is there a functional difference, Joe, between what Alex and I set up with our wizards and how they interact with army versus the alchemist of the Byzantine emperor cooking up the latest batch of Greek fire for the Navy?
I don't know. I would love to know the recipe for that, though. They still don't know what the hell it was. They know
I
pine
know,
tar.
right? They lost it.
God, I would love to know what that was.
I mean, does that make sense to you, Alec? About
I totally agree. Yeah.
Primeval Fantasy RPG has a question for Alex. And let's see. How much PvP at this highest tier? King versus King, Arc Wizard versus Arc Wiz. How is this played out? A lot of one-on-one time with strategies, maintenance rather than group table time?
So great question. Have done a lot of very high tier PvP. Well, I shouldn't say PvP actually, because PvP implies player versus player. So I have not done a lot of player versus player. When I ran Oplenian Knights, there was the player characters, and then I did have two friends who were running the two respective big bads in the campaign setting, and so they would kind of tell me what their people would do, and I handled most of the logistics for that. I have not run a one-to-one patron style PvP campaign for a host of reasons, but I know that there are guys on the Discord that are doing it in the Bro SR, as well as a couple other affiliated groups, but I myself have not. I'm not an expert on that.
Yeah,
I want to ask a question about something.
I'm just going to hop in and go PvP.
Yeah, go ahead.
Especially since you're talking, it's PvP is different if you're in an MMO and you're playing with strangers and you're having this player versus player on your EverQuest server. That's fine. Usually, when it comes to an RPG or tabletop, you're playing with a group, and yes, your group might get more powerful. You might have your own interests, but if it breaks out into PvP for the intent of PvP, usually it never ends very well at the table one way or the other, unless the game was set up for that right from the start. It just doesn't. It isn't. It's like former allies now. Two wizards trying to. Maybe it plays out as a hypothetical, but as part of a campaign, I don't think PvP between players, player versus DM, like Alex is talking about, certainly. Player versus a player you bring in just for that session to play that other side, and the GM is more like an arbiter of the war table. That could work too, but to have players from that same group get to that point, in most campaigns, it usually means the GM screwed something up.
Yeah, the only time that there's only been in the 40 years I've been running my Majestic Wildlands, it's only ever come up maybe a half a dozen times, and it was always
Dwayne.
Two.
I know you.
Yes, Dwayne was involved several of those times, but it was always one group who was not socially connected with another group. For example, the first time that Dwayne got involved, he was the home game with him and Tim and a bunch of our friends that I had at Meadville at the time. And then at college, when I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, I had a group of friends, and Dwayne was playing an evil character, and he heard about what these guys were doing, so he decided to screw with them. And but he never actually went down and
yeah, but it's not the actual group. It wasn't a group that was established in the whole campaign, and then everybody reaches their name level, and everybody goes, "Oh, now it's time for me to kill my former friends." That usually means that
No, what winds up happening is what you experienced, Joe, and what if we were to continue the one campaign the last campaign I ran for you, and Greg and everybody. Greg was like the guy who got the shot of being king.
Yeah.
The rest of you were developing your own niches.
Within his kingdom.
Base of power, but so you were looking to be his court priest and
the chief priest of hedonism and debauchery. That was what I was rolling towards. Yeah.
So everybody would have developed their niche, and there were times when players become at loggerhead, but usually everything they'd done prior if they would have went at each other, they would have wrecked what both of them had built. Yeah. So it was just a little bit of sniping, and that's where it ended.
We jumped in on Mike though. He wanted to say something there.
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry.
I just wanted to ask something about so you have a sandbox method there too with the game, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a pure sandbox where like, look, you're walking through the woods and there could be a black dragon ahead. I don't care if you're first level, or is it more scaled sandbox?
That's a great question. So what I suggest in the rule book, and I sort of lay out my formula for doing this, is that you set up a sandbox built around the borderlands. And so you have an area of civilization. Then you have some line of forts that represents the borderlands. And then you have increasingly dangerous areas that are further and further from the borderlands.
Like EverQuest zones back in the day.
Similar to EverQuest zones, but based in the reality of the game world.
Yeah.
And again, my inspiration was late antiquity, where you literally had, Hadrian's Wall. North of Hadrian's Wall was really dangerous for a Roman citizen. South of Hadrian's Wall, much less so. But, just like back in antiquity, sometimes the crazed Picts would get past the wall and they'd burn villages or set up a camp or something. And so likewise, you have some little points of interest that are low level that are inside the borderlands. And those need attention. And then you have some, points on the other side of the borderlands that are more dangerous, and then further. So it is scaled, but it's scaled with an eye towards verisimilitude as well as gameplay. I should add, I also say that your setting should have two bad guys. You should have a visible bad guy or threat that has distracted all of the existing rulers and high-level powers. So in the Arran Empire campaign, that high-level threat is the invasion of the Skysos nomads from the west, who are threatening to overrun the continent. So a lot of the army, the best leaders, a lot of the powerful wizards and stuff, they've all gone off westward to deal with the Skysos menace. And then you have a secret menace, which is metaphysical. And in the Arran Empire setting, it's the awakening of the undead Zaharan Empire and the slumbering sorcerer kings. And thirdly, I advise that you should make all of the nobles either decadent and depraved, stupid, or evil. And the reason for that is because what I discovered, to my shock, that
based on watching in DC, right? I mean,
right, yeah. But the typical 21st century gamer actually doesn't feel good about just slaughtering his opponents and seizing their thrones on a pile of bodies. Like, they kind of feel bad about it. Oh man, we just butchered the king. Does that make us the bad guys? So I try and set it up so that typically the arc goes like this. You're doing your adventures, you're sandboxing around, you start to discover the rising menace. You go back and you're like, hey, Mr. Lord Bob, like, we've just discovered this rising menace. And, Lord Bob looks at you from his 16-course dinner with his slaves waving fans over him, and he says, don't bother me. At which point the players get, very frustrated, and they say, we need to do something about this. And that drives them to have the justification to feel righteous about their conquest and takeover of the setting. And I go in.
He's got a halfling singing off to the side as he.
Yeah, exactly. And I go into all of this in the judge's journal now to sort of explain the methods. Now, obviously, there's other ways to run a campaign, but that method is tried and true. I've used it 5 times at this point, and it works really well. And it has great literary basis as well. Like Game of Thrones is basically just that, right? With the Game of Thrones versus the coming of the undead from the north, Lord of the Rings, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, Conan never ran into a ruler that knew his ass from the hole in the walls.
No, exactly, right.
It's very much classic pulp literature too.
Absolutely,
none of those guys knew what they were doing. So,
yeah, and so when Conan kills the king of Aquilonia on his throne, he's like doing everybody a favor.
Right.
Yeah.
You must be lucky, Alex, because my group, Joe, they hear about Arthur's heir and how he could bring peace between 2 warring people, like in our world religion. What did the party do? They kill King Arthur's heir.
Was that because you probably dropped that nonsense within the lore that you were trying to impart to us with the leprechauns rhyming, and we slaughtered them because we couldn't deal with their rhyming? If you were trying to convey knowledge through a leprechaun's rhyming tunes, they're generated by AI. Rob, they're going down. I'm sorry. We wiped those motherfuckers.
No, that knowledge wasn't part of the leprechaun. That was adjacent, but that was Morgan Le Fay manipulating you guys to doing a mission for her.
Yeah, they just went down fast.
So if your party is not Rob and Joe, you're probably okay. If Rob and Joe are anywhere nearby, you're gonna have issues.
I mean, honestly, like I think it's fine if they're like that. Like in the Oplenian Knights campaign, they lost and everybody got party wiped, and the Dark Lord took over Oplenia. It was like, ouch. you guys totally failed and screwed the pooch. I'm sorry. So I'm fine with the players losing and the world being overrun by darkness. I don't lose sleep over it.
No, that's the thing, Alex. They didn't lose. I mean, we ended the campaign at that point because of real life consideration, but it was a good ending point for part 2 if we ever decide to run it. No, the player who killed Arthur's heir is an heir himself, and now he could take advantage of the chaos to regain his throne. So
that sounds fantastic to me.
Yeah, it sounds like Game of Thrones, actually.
Yeah, it was awesome. Very Game of Thrones.
I think I'd have killed the heir too if I was also an heir.
Hey, wait a second. Do I move up the list? All right.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, it was a total setup. They said, okay, yes, I have a boat. You need transportation. I'll take you there, and I'll get you to where Arthur's dying, and we can all be together. And they got on the boat. The guy's party got in the boat, and
I told.
And then he died of drowning. A tragic death at sea.
I had a mass command spell, and I had them all jump overboard in their armor and die. Yeah, that was brilliant. That was a fun one.
And he was wielding Excalibur too.
Oh
dear. Well, I mean, back you read the history of English emperors or English kings, and so many of those guys or the hangers-on died of hunting accidents. We went hunting and the arrow went off course
in the chest.
Yeah, it took both the grandkids out. Well, it's just baad luck there. And so here's your new king.
We brought up Conan a couple of times so far, and I got a question now because Chuck Dixon's Conan is something that's coming to Adventure Conqueror King system too.
Yeah, what is that about?
Oh yes, definitely talk about that. That's awesome.
Totally. So Chuck Dixon, obviously super talented comic creator, the co-creator of Bane and the Birds of Prey, noticed that Conan had entered the public domain, not all of it, but most of the stories. And so in particular, the Hyborian Age essay, which lays out the world. And so he launched this concept of Chuck Dixon's Conan, which is a series of illustrated novels written by him, being published by Castalia House, set in the Hyborian world. So I reached out to Chuck, and I'm a big Conan fan. I mean, the game is actually named for the whole Lancet paperback, Ace paperback book series. Conan the Adventurer, Conan the Conqueror, etc. Oh. And and so I asked if I could have the license for Chuck Dixon's Conan. Now, obviously I could have just done what he did and gone public domain, but I think there's a lot of value in working with Chuck. He's a super talented writer. Amen. And he's also he's helping to build out the world so that it's not just the public domain stories, but it can kind of transcend that. So we're going to be using ACKS II, and in conjunction with what I mentioned earlier, the low fantasy mod from Heroic Fantasy Handbook. So, the spells will be slightly different than the one that's in ACKS Core, less blasty, more summoning, take longer to cast, that kind of thing.
Cthulhu stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
You drop that in there too, a little bit of that flavor. That's cool, man. That should be really cool. I kind of like the low magic scene as well. I think that would be very fun to do.
I do too. I mean, I that's why I wrote that supplement, and I ran a low magic Lord of the Rings campaign for about 70 sessions.
Will those rules be incorporated in your DM guide, a version, the judge's notebook? I think judge's journal. Is that what you're calling it?
No, so some of the heroic fantasy rules are incorporated, but not the magic system because it would just double the size of the book.
Oh,
okay. So that's an updated heroic fantasy is probably going to go into the Conan source book. I think is a good place for it.
All right.
Oh,
Cool.
So your merchant system that you had in AKS, do you ever had a player took a shine at it and convinced the whole party to be merchant traders sailing the whatever sea you got in the Uran Empire, going from port to port, trading and having adventures?
I haven't seen them do it by sea. I have seen them do it by land. Yeah. And so we had in Oplenian Nights, they had a adventurer who set up a spice merchant caravan across the deserts. In my current actual play, the venturer is the party leader, and he's started to accumulate a caravan of wagons, and they're carrying trade goods back and forth. So yeah, there's definitely been some folks that have run with it. There's like a certain mindset of players that get really into it. Like the group called themselves the Adventure Capitalists, and and they were like drafted up a little contract for everybody and things. It was pretty silly. So
yeah. I have a friend, Josh, that Joe knows that. He went and he loves that. And again, thanks for letting me adapt your merchant system.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's worked out really well.
I have a question from somebody there. Cleve has been a party favorite. Are there any new combat actions?
Yes. So the big new combat action is called Sweep Attack. And what Sweep Attack lets you do is you declare in advance how many targets you want to hit that are adjacent to you. So let's say you want to sweep 4 targets that are, boom, 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 boom. Then you roll to hit each one. And each one you hit, you do your base damage divided by the total number of targets you selected up front. So let's say I tried to hit 4 targets, and normally I'm doing an average of about 12 points of damage. So now I'm going to do an average of 3 points of damage to each of those targets that I hit. I might hit none, I might hit all 4. And then if I kill at least half of the ones I targeted, I get to cleave, and the cleave can be another sweep attack. So a high-level fighter with dealing high damage can use sweep attack in conjunction with cleave to really clean up the battlefield. It also makes things like giants really fun when you put them up against mass troop formations, because they can do sweep attacks, take out a bunch of guys, step in, sweep attack, etc. So it's good fun.
I know, Alex, you went to Harvard, you're a lawyer, but I think you said you haven't practiced in like a couple decades. I went to a much lower tier law school. I'm a lawyer. I had to practice only a couple years. And weirdly enough, for all my involvement in D&D over the years, I know jack diddly about the OGL. But I know you had to un-OGLify ACKS I.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I did.
What does that entail? I mean, in without getting into the nitty gritty of the let's not bore the shit out of everybody here. Rob would love it, but I don't want to get that deep. But what is the gist of what did you have to do to un-OGLify ACKS to make it ACKS II so you're completely clean?
Yeah. So, it was a couple things. So first, I did some research about what terms predated Dungeons and Dragons. So it turns out armor class, hit points, saving throws, level, those all predated Dungeons and Dragons. So there was no need to say this is trademark or copyright of Wizards of the Coast. I can use those. I did a comparison of all of the different games that existed as to how many attributes they had and what they named those attributes. And I found that in general, most games during the 1980s were within 1 or 2 of being identical to the D&D attributes. So I decided that was a safe place to be. So I changed wisdom to will, and I changed intelligence to intellect. I couldn't find any use of cleric as a term for like a fighting priest militant prior to D&D popularizing that. So I abandoned the word cleric and changed it to crusader.
Okay.
But obviously, fighter was fine. Magic user became mage because again, nobody called them magic users before TSR started calling them that, and I didn't want to go with wizard and sorcerer either because of third, fourth, fifth edition approach. Thief obviously was fine. It's that dwarf and elf they don't have any control over.
Yep.
Then I went into the more tricky areas, which was the spells and the monsters. So one of the things I noticed in reviewing the monsters is that some of them were obviously rooted in mythology, and that was fine. But some of them had, like, the D&D isms had transcended the mythology, right? Like, most people think of a Gorgon as like an iron-scaled creature that breathes petrifying cloud because of D&D. But, if you go back to the original myths, that was a late myth, that was a medieval myth. But if you go back to the earliest myths, the Gorgons were winged creatures with tusks and talons that turned you to stone if you gazed on them. So I redid the monsters to be closer to the original mythic roots, renamed some of the ones. And then for the spells was the most work. And that was, I had to go through every spell and rename a ton of them. And redo some that simply, like, no one had ever done this before until D&D, and it didn't feel right to have that as a spell.
So basically, you would change magic missile to magic arrow, and then make it, instead of 1d4 plus 1, you'd make it 1d4. What level of change?
So
something like that,
So magic missile, I changed to mage missile, and the way it works is that instead of being a spell where you get like a certain number of magic missiles based on your level, instead it's a concentration spell, and as long as you're concentrating, you can fling one mage missile per round for 1d4 damage. So it's functionally different. Likewise, like Burning Hands now instead is Fan of Flames, and instead of just being a fan of a cone of fire from your hands, now it's selective fire. So you pick the targets and fire streaks from your fingers into them. Stuff like that. So like I made subtle changes to everything.
So you didn't take advantage of the Creative Commons 5e SRD? Or
no,
because I remember you started your work before they released.
Yeah, no, because I don't want my work to necessarily be under the Creative Commons. It doesn't give you a lot of control about what parts you can make open and what parts you can't.
Well, Creative Commons doesn't require you to open the license that Wizards chose. Doesn't require you to open it under the same terms. It's just the only requirement is that credit.
Yeah. No, I chose not to use the Creative Commons.
Okay.
I wonder how many more people are going to do it that way. I mean, I know they got the Orc license, you got the Elf license, you got the, a bunch of different. I think Matt Finch has his own version of a license he tinkered with for his thing.
Yep.
I wonder how many people are just going to say, "Screw it, I'll make the break and do what you did." But the thing is, you have the ability to do that, Alex. As a lawyer, you get it. You've been invested in this whole world for since the beginning of the OSR. Not many people have that ability, nor do they have the money to pay a lawyer to do such a thing for them. Do this. What kind of lawyer is going to have the capability to know what you know about the game systems as well as the law, right? To do that level of research. So I think a lot of people are just going to stick with what Rob just said. Slap the 5e, Creative Commons label on it, and then hopefully nothing blows up on them. Hopefully it doesn't get screwed later. But
Matt Finch analyzed it pretty good, and he was pretty comfortable in releasing his latest Swords and Wizardry complete under just taking advantage of the Creative Commons and just put. If you look at the beginning of the book, and it's not open, okay, but that book isn't open. He is going to release an SRD, but it's not his book he released, and all he had to do was put that credit. I talked about it with him.
Yeah, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like I felt. I'd been a lifelong supporter of Wizards of the Coast and TSR, and it just felt like being stabbed in the back, and I wanted to wash my hands of them.
I think there's a lot of creatives that feel that way. A lot of people in the community feel that way. And what we've all seen is that there are different licenses that are coming out. There are creators like Kevin Crawford, who's releasing his stuff now. Every time he puts something new out, he's putting out an SRD under Creative Commons 0. So as he put it, essentially it's public domain. Do with it as you will, because this is the total opposite of what Wizards of the Coast wanted to see happen.
Yeah.
They didn't want this community to rise up and say, "Hey, you know what? they were going to take away your ability to work off of somebody else's work and make your own designs. Well, guess what? Now the community is making sure that others can work with them or build off it, and I think that is the exact opposite of what they had planned.
Yeah, I agree.
They screwed the pooch. And Alex just said it in the private. He has to drop in a few minutes.
Yeah, he's got to hit out.
I just before he goes, I think that I don't know if anybody mentioned it at the beginning, but I just dropped a link to his channel in there, guys. If you like what his approach to things is, he has a YouTube channel and he runs games there, and he also breaks down his book Arbiter of Worlds in, I think, chapter by chapter, essentially, right, Alex?
Yeah, I did it by chapter by chapter, and now I'm on to other things. But yeah.
But you'll understand his approach, his style if you watch these videos. They're really good. It's good stuff to 15, 20 minutes usually.
One last question on your Arbiter World. So, I remember at the beginning of your channel you were trying to popularize the term simulationism.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going? How's that working out so far? Now it's been like a couple months.
Oh gosh, I mean, judging by the amount of hate I get, I think I'm doing a really good job.
You're getting hate.
It's working out great.
Yeah, no, when you take flack, you're over the target. So no, joking aside, I think it's going well. When I started Ascendant, which was my superhero game, everybody thought I was crazy. They're like, you're going to do a 496-page crunchy superhero game using logarithmic math? Like, that's insane. What do you think it is, the 1980s? And but that was a platinum bestseller, and it did great for me. And I think there's more of an appetite for crunch than people think there is. And so I like crunch, I like simulation, and I just want to, I'm happy to lean into that spot and, leave the playing field for the story games and the narrative games to other folks who enjoy that sort of thing.
Well,
Alex, thank you. Thanks so much for showing. Yeah, this has been awesome.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Looks like
folks, there's a link at the bottom of the screen. It's a short link, 10 cards there. It's tavern.games/ACKS. It'll take you right to the Kickstarter. If you back the Kickstarter, you probably will get a chance to play test some of the materials for Chuck Dixon's Conan work that's going to be coming up. I mean, looks really a lot of fun. I'm really excited to see what happens with that. And I've been a huge fan of ACKS for years, so what can I say? And I'm a huge fan of Alex. So, Alex,
thank
you.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who's been backing the project. Blown me away. I'm still in shock.
Rob, Joe, thank you for dropping.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
They can stick around for another 30 minutes.
Oh, all right. If you guys want
to have them stick around, let's rip somebody.
Stupid.
Yeah, let's rip somebody. Come on.
These
guys are always up.
We're gonna rip somebody. We can bust up Matt Jackson. I mean, that's always.
Since we were talking about open gaming, design mechanisms just announced Mithras Imperative is going to be under the York license. I mean, we kind of knew that was going to be the case, but they formally announced it with a new cover and everything.
All right. So for folks that don't know, Mithras is the direct descendant or reskinning of RuneQuest 6, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
RuneQuest 2, RuneQuest 6.
So there are many flavors of RuneQuest. And you also have the classic RuneQuest 2, which is available as a reprint. You have the RuneQuest that is out by Chaosium. You have, I don't know, is Legend still in print from Mongoose, which was Mongoose?
Oh, you have this too, which is under the York license now.
Basic role playing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very beautiful book.
So I'm actually looking forward to what we get from ACKS under Alex's license.
I was going to ask him more. I read a lot of Chuck Dixon's blog stuff, and it's interesting how the whole Conan thing, because the way it's figured out, he can only use certain things because certain parts of Conan are open license and certain parts still aren't. So it's really it's really interesting. So as long as you write the stories that take place in the part that's open, you're fine. But it's it's interesting because it's just, you got to be really careful. You got to really know what your Conan history and what came out when and what's open and what's
You
not.
gotta.
So
Yeah.
Well, it's just like when the OGL first hit and the D20 SRD hit. What did everybody say once they realized what the problems were? Put away your D&D books. Just sit down with the SRD. Don't look at anything else. Well, I just posted, Eric, a link to all the public domain Conan stories in the U.S. And so if you're going to do something with Conan, there's still trademark stuff that you have to watch out for. But if you're going to do something with Conan, look at that list carefully, put away your Conan books, and only use that as your reference.
I know that Joe Block had to do something similar when he put out Swords of Cthulhu. He needed to only use, because everybody played with Cthulhu over the years, right? It's just so much of a blend.
Right.
So he had to go back and say what is actually public domain and then put something out and then fill in the gaps without using, subconsciously channeling stuff he already knew. Like, somebody wrote about the King in Yellow later on, but there's a base King in Yellow from, that was available. You can't grab the stuff from later on and incorporate it into the King in Yellow, right? Like that. So God bless. That's a hell of a lot.
Nice thing about
the original Robert Chambers stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that link doesn't work. Hold on.
Yeah, the original Robert Chambers stuff is all open right at this point because it came out in the 19th century. But yeah, the anything later, and a lot of stuff that we consider Yellow King was actually matter of fact, most of Lovecraft stuff was later. Robert Chambers stuff, which I highly recommend, it's really good. It was very vague about what's going on there, whereas later writers kind of took that and ran with it. So pretty much almost anything published about the King in Yellow is not open license.
Really?
I don't know why it added opens in a new tab at the end of that, but let's see if this works.
The nice thing about that Wikisource site, it tells you the stories that are not in public domain and when they will be in public domain.
Very cool. Yeah, that's very cool too.
You can pre-write your stuff that's going to be
released the day of.
Yeah, wow! Look at this. Some of the stuff it's not open till 2048. So that's we're not going to see that. How about
apparently some Solomon Kane stories are due to be caught or due to be public domain in the early 20s.
I'm looking for something really.
Brand Brackmore.
I just read that. I just read all the Brand Brackmore.
Some of the best stuff is
after you guys interviewed Kelsey about Shadow Dark, and you both mentioned that Brand Brackmore, the worms. What the hell was it called? The worm one. The Worms of the Earth or whatever hell it was.
Worms of the Earth.
I gotta read
story.
that. I enjoyed the crap out of that more than I thought I would. I really did.
That's one of his better stories. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, it's going to be public domain in 4 years or 5
Wow,
years.
some of this Conan stuff. I hope you weren't sitting around going, man, the God in the Bowl is awesome. 2071. I guess that we'll be using that one. But no, most of the best stuff here. I'm looking Red Nails, open domain. Beyond the Black River, my favorite Conan story. Open, Which Shall Be Born, People of the Black Circle, Devil and Iron, Queen of the Black Coast. This is all the best, best stuff here. Rogues in the House, Pool of the Black One, Black Colossus. Tower of the Elephant. Sheesh. Yeah, so really the best stuff is an open license. So go get after it. If you want to use it, it's all out there. It's awesome.
Not too shabby.
Some of there's still some good stuff that isn't, unfortunately, but like I said, pretty much some of the best stuff is. So. That's awesome. That's a great page there.
I wonder if they're going to come out with movies since it's free and not paying any royalties. Just hire some writers who know a little bit.
Next year, Joe. After next year, because
here's the problem with the movies is that to this day, and it's the year 20 whatever, there has never been a single Conan media based on an actual story that Robert E. Howard wrote, and that's just infuriating because he's a great writer, and the plots he wrote were incredible, and yet every single person that's done a Conan. Now, the first Conan movie takes parts of about 5 stories and shoves them all in there and kind of makes a whatever. But no, there's never been an actual Conan story written or based on an actual Robert E. Howard book, which is a crime, or a story which is a crime, and that's what sucks, because that's why Conan has never succeeded. I mean, the reason Conan was so great is because Robert E. Howard is an incredible writer.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to use his source material, what do you're just pissing in the wind there. I mean, come on.
I mean, look what they do these days with modern movies, dude. I mean,
maybe the Netflix series will actually start using stories.
I mean, if I was going to,
any format can use that.
I would just walk in and just throw down red nails. Say, here we go, and okay, that's all you need to do. You don't need to even write the script or my favorite story, Beyond the Black River. Here we go. We're gonna do this. Boom, miniseries. All right. Or were they? I mean, where'd you get this? This is awesome. Well, Howard actually wrote this. Oh, we never done that before. No, you haven't. You've never done that before because you're idiots. The same thing we had the same issue with Lovecraft for a while. I mean, nothing accurate to Lovecraft was ever presented. To this day, we still see garbage.
It's all shit. There's not one good Lovecraft movie or show out there that I've seen. Nothing.
Because they can't figure out how to do horror the way Lovecraft did, which was, it's all you're using your imagination to think of something worse than what's actually happening. Whereas people that do movies and shows about like, oh, you know what? Let's make it super gory and just over the top. It's just ridiculous. I mean, Dreams of the Witch House, it's probably been done 5 times now, and not a single damn one time has ever been done like it was written in the book, which is a great story. It's creepy and it's just awesome. And I will say that a lot of Lovecraft stuff is more. You spend 18 pages on backstory that creeps you out before you even get to the main story. So that's hard to show. That's very hard to make a show about that. But you could do it, and then there's enough Dunwich horror you could do. I mean, that would be. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff he says, "Oh, this is so horrible, I can't even talk about it or show it." Well, you can show it in a movie. Just go ahead and show it. It's horrible. Let's see what the Dunwich horror looked like. It looked terrific.
The Color Out of Space was barely passable. Like that movie they based on the.
That was the latest one with what's his name, Nick Cage.
Yeah, it was all right. You know what I mean? It wasn't horrible, but I mean, who wants to see that? I want to see the horrors. I want to see where they go to Antarctica and come across all that stuff and get wiped out. But how do you? I mean, when he describes something, the buildings were strange. They didn't make sense. The buildings were made with non-Euclidean geometry. That's when
a guy can shine. That's when you can shine and say, "Look, we're going to show the unshowable."
Yeah,
and you don't just jump to gore like, "Oh, well, he didn't really explain what this monster is, so we're going to have it rip somebody's head off and eat the brains because that's going to show how horrible it is." No,
are you guys aware of Call of Cthulhu? Of the short film?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, the silent ones are great. The 2 silent ones are awesome. Or not the the one silent one and the one black and white one.
I've never seen
but yeah, that is actually incredible. And then the one they based one on the oh gosh, I can't remember. But those are by the Cthulhu Society, or there's some society that does it, and they're really good. They're both. I don't know if there's just 2 or 3. I know there's at least 2, and those are both very, very accurate. I mean, because it's the Cthulhu Society, they can't get away with making a bunch of shit and throwing it in there because people are like, wait a second, you're not supposed to be doing that kind of stuff. So they're both really good. I recommend those movies very highly.
And I've not seen. Dandelion Games is asking me, have I seen any of the stuff from Del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities? I've not. What is that?
Oh, that's really well.
It's an horror anthology on Netflix.
Yeah, it's not bad. He takes some very well-known, well, not very well-known, but some well-known horror stories. He does one of my favorite stories, The Autopsy, which is a great story by Robert Shea. I think Robert Shea did it. It's a really good story. They do an excellent version of that. And it's hit or miss. About half of them are okay, and the other half are just kind of roll your eyes. That's really okay. But half of them are pretty good. And so I would recommend the Cabinet of Curiosities, definitely. If you find one that's not any good, just watch the next one. It's probably going to be good. So it's
all right. That's the way Star Trek movies operate, right? Just bump to the next one.
Well, I mean, I think almost all of them are based on existing short stories. I don't know if there's any originals in there, and so it depends on the quality of story they chose for the like I said, the autopsy is great. One of my favorite horror stories of all time, and they do a pretty good job with it. I mean, not exactly the way I would have made it, but it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah. It's cool. Hey, listen, guys, I
The
gotta
other
drop 'cause
film,
I have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning tomorrow for work, so I'm gonna drop. All right. So thank you for having me. I appreciate that, and I've enjoyed the conversation with Alex.
Anytime.
Yeah.
This
So
was cool.
thanks for letting me on as well, guys.
Take care, guys.
You're very welcome, Rob. You're very
Graveyard.
welcome.
Okay, I'm looking at the list now. Graveyard Rats is really good, based on the short story by Henry Kuttner. That's pretty good. Lot 36 is okay. Autopsy, great. Michael Shea. The Outside. I didn't like The Outside. That's too modern. Oh, they did Pickman's Model. They did pretty good job with that.
Oh, I like that one.
Dreams of the Witch House. They did a version of it, and once again, it's not like the original version. I mean, that's one of the greatest short stories ever by Lovecraft. Just do the version like that. But no, it wasn't bad. It wasn't horrible. And so about it's hit and miss, very hit and miss.
So I have something to share with you guys. Drive Through RPG. You know, they decided my latest version of Black Marsh. They had to do some editorializing with it.
What?
Yeah, you know me. I write these lethal settings, so they decided the intro chapter for this ought to be the handbook for the recently deceased.
Oh, they screwed. I hate when it happens.
And they don't want me to run this with the OSR system. They want me to run it with Fate.
So how many extra books did you get in that?
3, and you finally get to the new version of Black Marsh. It really irks me because a ton of people are downloading Black Marsh, and I want to release it for print again. And so this is acceptable print quality for the new layout that I gave it. I have a lot more pictures now, and but I got to reorder it because I can't be sure I got the cover right because they jammed 3 books.
You wouldn't know the edging, yeah.
They jammed 3 books. I was looking at it, it's like, oh wow, I messed up the cover. A handbook of recently deceased. Okay, what's going on here?
Oh boy. Great.
Spot on. There we
Thought
go.
you would get a kick out of that.
The only thing that's missing is WotC had something to do with it, because then that would have made perfect sense. They screwed up something else.
Yeah, I was looking at the control numbers. There are control numbers on the back of these, and this one is the first book is number 62. The Book of Haunts is 63, and mine is 64. And so this came rolling off the line, and they decided, they all got to rewrap.
We'll save money by putting them all in one.
And you can see where they trimmed the extra. They have a little white border right here.
Yeah. Wow.
So
the cover
Mike,
came
did your
out.
Rangers win yet?
What now?
Did your Rangers win yet?
It is a pitcher's duel. It is 0-0 in the 6th inning, and the pitcher for the Diamondbacks is pitching a no-hitter, and the pitcher for the Rangers is pitching a 3-hitter. I mean, it's ridiculous. I can't even I could barely concentrate on the show tonight because nothing is happening. It's just strikeout after strikeout after. I mean, it's an absolute pitcher's duel in the World Series, and it's making me sick to my stomach. So yeah, no, nobody's winning yet. It's just back and forth.
Well, how big of a problem? How big of a problem we're having these days with misprint POD?
It's not often, because I know that Frog God uses it quite a bit, and you'll go along for a long time, it'll be fine. Then you'll have a batch that's bad, and it's just quality control, I guess. Every once in a while you'll have a bad batch. It doesn't always happen, so it's actually I think they get it right more times than they don't. I've actually the worst thing I ever had once I bought a bunch of Nod books, the one by
Splatter.
Stater, and they were printed so lightly I could barely read them. So that's just a screw up somewhere. So I sent them back, and the next batch I got were fine. So that was the worst thing I ever had from a POD, is that for some reason the ink was running out of the machine or something. I don't know. How do you get light print run on it? I mean, you could barely read it. It was so light. So yeah, I sent those back.
Well, I will say that Drive Through customer service is good. All I had to do was take a few picture,
Yep.
confirm my shipping address, and they're going to
Absolutely. Yep.
ship
That's all I
out
had to
a
do too.
replacement for free.
Yep. And the same thing with me. It worked out really well.
All right. Well, I'm going to head out.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Later, Rob.
Okay.
All right. Good. Oh, by the way, good luck on your Kickstarter. That looks awesome. By the way.
Well, I wasn't going to mention tonight because it's really about Alex Kickstarter, but
mentioned it.
yes, it looks like Joe is right. I'm going to, if all goes well, I'm at 99,500 and well over 500 backers, and it looks like I'll break 10,000. So
That's great. That is great.
yeah, and people seem I got the first. So anybody listening to this, if you're wondering what the book would be like, well, if you back me, you'll get the first beta PDF. I just released it, and I'm working on the. There's going to be 3 books as part of the Kickstarter: the How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox, the new digest version of Black Marsh at cost, and also in the How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox, I have an example setting, the island of Paid, and that is going to be its own book. So if you like that setting, you don't have to listen to read my advice over and over again just to find out who lives in what town.
Great. I'm glad. Well, it looks like it's taken off. That is awesome.
Yeah,
that is absolutely great.
And I appreciate the shout outs that you guys have been giving me.
Oh, definitely, Rob. Well deserved, man.
All right. Good night, guys.
Always good. Later.
Good. I feel like yeah, and that gets a Christie novel.
Who's the next suspect that's going to pop into the room?
Yeah, 4 little Indians.
Dun,
3
dun,
little
dun.
Indians. 2 little Indians. What was I gonna say? I don't even know.
I'm yawning. Oh, dear.
You know what, Mike? We should probably let you get to.
Let's break it down a little early. We did our and Alex, by the way, that sounds like an awesome Kickstarter, and I'm gonna have to find the money to back it. Man, it's pricey. I may have to go PDF on this one. I don't know if I can afford the cash for the book, so we'll see. But his stuff is so good. He's such a good writer.
And what I didn't get a chance to mention, because we had 5 of us, is that his stuff is essentially modular. You can take pieces from and use it in your campaign in Osric and Swords and Wizardry, in whatever you're running. It'll fit fine. And his character classes are extremely balanced.
That's what I thought was really cool. I'm going to have to steal some of that stuff because, it's true. High level play. That's why so few people play high level. That's why nobody plays high level 5e stuff, because it absolutely the mage at a certain level absolutely destroys every other character class. You can't stop them. It's unstoppable, and they basically just control all the action at that point. If you have a high level mage, you can do whatever you like because they have these spells that just do.
Yep.
And so that's cool.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to balance all the character class. I'm really interested to find out what he did. So
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man.
As
Later,
always,
everyone.
safe, be well. God bless. Roll the dice, roll them well. Tomorrow night on the Discord, there is a hangout. And what is it? I'm not sure if it's Glenn and I. Glenn and I. On Friday night, and then
pop in and say hi to Glenn. Yes.
Reg and I for Gameless Health on Saturday. All right, folks. Thank you so much,
everyone. Thanks for coming. Push the like button. Push the thumbs up. Push the